Hello, this is Chris Nelson from evolveconsciousness.org. I will be reading the article Modalities of Thought, Language and Reality, Part 2. This comes after Part 1 of Trivium and Reality. The content is 2.1 Thinking About Reality, 2.2 Consciousness Addendum, which is an addendum to a previous article on axioms, existence, and consciousness, which I recommend you read previously. 2.3 Control, Conformity, and Irresponsibility, and 2.4 Importance of Thought. And for the importance of thought, there's also a book excerpt from the Ringing Cedar book series, which is a bit new agey but has a lot of valuable information specifically on the importance of thought. And I posted some excerpts from this book into on the blog, and you can read it to understand how much time we have in our life and how much we have to maximize it. 2.1 Thinking About Reality. Oh, and the featured picture, the featured image I have for this post is one I've discussed in the previous infographic, the previous presentation on Language and Reality Part 1. So I'll explain it again when I get to it in a few paragraphs. 2.1 Thinking About Reality. General grammar is a systematic method of gathering raw data of a similar nature into a body of knowledge known as a subject or study. Formal logic is the method of bringing full or intimate understanding to that body of knowledge. Grammar is like learning the alphabet. You are not sure what all these symbols mean, and you just take them in at first. First we observe and then gather and compile those observations into an organized database, grammar. Second, we process, logic, the data input, remove contradictions so that everything fits and follows from one another. Thirdly, find some value and meaning to derive some use in it for our lives and what we do. Our output, rhetoric, to express understanding into the world. We see, then conceptualize, then speak, do, act. Grammar uses the five senses to look at the individual parts and establish clear terms. Logic thinks, filters, validates, and fits the data together to form true premises, and rhetoric expresses that knowledge in a valid argument. A good reason to learn about the trivium is because some people sell lies, and most of us other people can't discern correctly and buy into those lies. Here's a quote from Trivium Study Guide, page 15. We've been fooled into misprioritizing what is most precious. When we fail to exercise our choice, to think or not to think, we become our own oppressors. So to think or not to think, that's because it's a volitional act. You don't have to engage in various depths of logical processing. You have to will yourself to do it, to that depth. The three parts of the trivium are somewhat mirrored in the three ways of developing thought, the three basic pieces of how we express knowledge, three basic modes of human cognition. The first modality of developing thought and expressing pieces of knowledge is the mythological and poetic mode of literary story narrative communication, using analogical descriptions to elucidate reality. It is creative, imaginative, and uses imagery to convey messages. It is ambiguous. The second modality in human cognition is the philosophic mode that employs greater logical methodologies to explain reality. The third modality is the scientific mode that uses the scientific method to gain knowledge and understanding of reality through experimentation, which is empiricism. Mythology is about thought, speech, stories, and narrative. Mythopoetic pertains to Mythopoeic pertains to creating those myths. Myths are stories to relate abstract ideas from our minds. We take phenomena seen in nature and try to explain it through personification of phenomena. Take a thought you cannot actualize and produce a mythology by relating it to an aspect of reality you can communicate. Turn the general idea into a personified object that doesn't really exist in objective reality as an extant concrete object. A fake mythology of society can also be created, where people are expected to accept it and not argue with this normalized narrative about ourselves, how we got here, how, quote, good things are. The methods of mythology and poetics are of metaphor and simile, analogical comparisons. The analogies compare gathered data from the universe and ourselves against each other to find similarity. This is the first and least structured of the three modalities. Keep this in mind when you read, quote, history, and the way people have been thought, and the way people may have thought back then, in a mythopoeic narrative storytelling, to metaphorically try to explain things or invent a, quote, history of how they got to where they were. We can learn a lot from fictional allegories about our current reality, provided in obfuscated means as to allow the illusions to be drawn by the receiver of the message. Though lacking refinement of symbol and logic to explain reality, the creative narrative is the basic method of conveying concept and is also a second basic form of cryptography, apart from the default of language itself. And this I explained either in the previous part 1 or in the Metaphysics, Language and Reality Fundamentals of the Trivium presentation on how language itself is a cryptographic system. Yes, it was in the Metaphysics, Language and Reality presentation. Though lacking refinement of symbol and logic to explain reality, the creative narrative is the basic method of conveying concepts and is also a second basic form of cryptography, apart from the default of language itself, where representations in reality are not conveyed through their own word symbol, but through another symbol that needs to be interpreted to be understood as a reference to something else. This is imagery, a basic component of human consciousness. So I was just explaining how the symbol represents something else that we're trying to convey about reality so that we can communicate it and interpret it. The philosophic mode, love of wisdom, care for truth and morality, goes beyond the basic grammatical organization of the mythopoeic first-level creative capacities. As knowledge and symbolism were built up in certain sectors using the first modality through story, song, and drama of verbal communication, there comes a limit to the amount of information that can be shared this way, as it depends on the memory and consciousness of the people sharing and interacting. I also have posts on memory and consciousness, so you can go read more about the importance of memory. The invention of symbols to store language outside of consciousness helped to spread knowledge. When enough data was written down, it could be better and more efficiently collated through synthesis and analysis. Philosophy progressed from the analogical to the logical form of thought, where phenomena were looked at within their own nature, their own category of being, rather than inexact, analogous comparisons of bare objects, events, or phenomena. So in the category of being, if you look at the presentation, Metaphysics, Language and Reality, there I go into the 10 categories of being, and predicates, and subject, and universals and particulars, and substance, and accidents. So you'll understand more if you go through that presentation. We look at things in themselves. Something does what it does because of what it does, and that's identity and causality. And there's links to information in the article for that. We look at things in themselves. Something does what it does because of what it is, not because of how it relates to other things, which is the analogy, the previous methodology for understanding reality. Now in the philosophic mode, we're looking at things as they are within themselves. So that's being as being, rather than from one thing compared to another and how they relate in order to understand it. Logic is used to detect and filter contradictions in the observations we coalesce. So I have the infographic from the part 1 of Language and Reality, the Trivium pivot point of equilibrium and balance, where we go from we go from the grammar input of existence and reality, the territory, and then we go to logic, and it's our consciousness, perceptions, and conceptions to process the objective matter in the territory, and we create our mind. In our minds, a map of that territory. And then we can output back into territory through rhetoric. So we can output back into reality the rhetoric, the actions, the wisdom of right action that we've chosen to do, or the communications we've chosen to express to others in reality, about reality, which is where the grammar comes from. So it goes from reality internally and back out to reality again. And I've also talked about it, as I mentioned, in the first part of Language and Reality, Trivium in Reality. So you can go listen to that for some additional descriptions as well, relating to the first part. Metaphysics helps us answer what is regarding the matter of existence, the grammar, knowledge. Epistemology looks at how do we know what is using the mind, a theory of knowledge, the logic processing. Ethics and aesthetics looks at what do we do and how do we do it, the rhetorical wisdom of right action. The purpose of philosophy is to answer the ethics and aesthetics of what to do in life, a moral philosophy, which brings us to the third modality of thought to understand reality with greater accuracy, the scientific method. This method can verify observations and phenomena by repeating a process of verification. It can help guide us in determining what is true or false, and therefore help in reality and morality, natural moral law. The scientific method is based in the previous aspects, but with more verification in physical reality to confirm the conclusion. Observe, gather data, and ask questions about reality, and hypothesize some answers through intuitive induction, then deduce an experiment to demonstrate the most accurate hypothesis, and finally conduct the experiment in reality to corroborate the accuracy of the hypothesis and validate a theory. There are causal links between actions and effects that are detectable over time and will be seen with repeated demonstration. Overall, the scientific method is intended to demonstrate our hypothetical propositions about reality. The trivium components of grammar and logic are used to help distinguish objective existence from the unreality created in our minds. Reality is made of primary particular individual substances. Substance has the thing that stands, that is perceivable with 5 senses in reality, and there is the thing that describes it, the subtext, universals, natural laws, etc. So there's the substance, and then there's the thing that's actually standing. The substance stands, and there's something that stands under it. First, we develop a mythological person story, the first phase, then look more and ask questions about it, the second phase, philosophical, epistemological, then manipulate or reproduce the substance, the third phase, scientific, experiment, demonstrate, by looking at the subtext, the universal, to see how complete our explanation is, then output into demonstration in objective reality to reproduce or modify the thing that stands, the substance, along with the subtext universal, such as natural law, that we have been able to discover in the progression of memory knowledge within ourselves or of humanity as a whole. The logic and grammar helps us to look at things more closely, to look for answers and get closer to the natural proper explanation of these universals that exist and are manifesting through the natural world. The trivium helps the development of subjective thought processes along with trying to make the discoveries of nature's laws, and continually trying to align our thoughts with these laws. Using the trivium method, mostly grammar and logic, helps us to put undifferentiated related data on a subject together in order to come to an understanding. It is taking a complex set of ideas and removing contradictions so that one thing follows from another as a coherent, integrated, unified, and harmonized whole. Think properly. Think for yourself. Start to question what you have been told. Find out what is in reality and what things mean. I have an infographic here of truth and frequency of perceptions based on Mark Passio's Truth and Frequency of Perceptions. And this comes from the presentation on the dualistic conceptual framework as well. I used it on Truth is Love presentation, so you can go look at those articles and videos and infographics. So the more you align with reality, with truth, the higher your frequency of perception of reality and of alignment with that reality, and your consciousness will also gain in frequency. And conversely, a limited perception of reality is limited access to truth, is limited unity and embodiment of truth, and that is limited consciousness. Like I said, go look into the dualistic conceptual framework presentation. You can get more of an explanation on that infographic. Logic brings the internal subjective realm into alignment with the objective rhythm of reality to produce harmonious external manifestations. Logic helps us find and verify truth. Over our lives, we learn to synchronize our expressions of consciousness with objective reality. Contradictions need to be removed to produce harmony with reality. Otherwise, we can end up living in subjective realities that are not true reflections of what is happening in the world. Not knowing about possible dangers in reality is dangerous for our own well-being, hence why the knowledge of evil is paramount to truth and morality in creating the world we want. Deduction helps to provide additional proof to validate a conception through comparison and correspondence to objective reality. From the higher level concept, we follow a self-consistent chain of causal relation to deduce back down to foundational concepts or axioms. And this you can apply it to what I've previously shown in part 1 in the induction to Dodgic grammar logic spiral. This past sentence applies very well there. From the higher level concepts, we follow a self-consistent chain of causal relation to deduce back down to foundational concepts or axioms. The secondary level constructs need to be related to the primary foundational constructs that hold everything up in our understanding of reality. So I guess this, rather than induction, deduction, spiral, the visual can apply, but this applies more to primary foundational core root causal concepts upon which our secondary constructs and concepts are built upon. So the foundational axiom ones are more important than the secondary ones because they hold everything up. If there are contradictions, there is a problem. Some foundational axioms are consciousness, causality, and existence itself. Proper effective use of logic maintains grounding in reality while allowing imagination and inductive intuition to formulate new ideas and then validating that search for knowledge through deduction. We need to dissect our own and others' thoughts and expressions and point out the contradictions and errors in understanding reality or themselves. That is the only way to find the truth accurately. As we bring our thoughts, emotions, and actions into greater alignment with truth and morality, we evolve consciousness in greater degrees as well. Section 2.2, Consciousness Addendum, continued from previous article on the subject, referenced Axioms, Existent Consciousness, and Identity, and another article, Tracing Reality, the Visionary Quest to Wisdom. At the end of part 1 on language and reality, I mentioned five or six very important articles at the bottom of each page that should be read in addition to these 5-part presentations because it's prerequisite information defining things more accurately so you can have a better understanding of certain terms used in this presentation, such as consciousness, which this section 2.2 is an addendum to. So I do recommend checking out my previous work in order to understand a greater definition and meaning. Section 2.2 Consciousness Addendum. Consciousness is primarily a term that relates to knowledge and morality, as I previously demonstrated through etymology itself. Like I said, go look at the previous articles, you'll see how I demonstrated that. It has to do with knowledge and morality. Not only knowledge, not simply knowing. There is another form of consciousness we can conceive of, the, quote, all-pervasive, omnipotent, omnipresent consciousness of the, quote, one that underlies everything, the, quote, one mind. From this different perspective of consciousness, everything, even rocks, are consciousness, and the word becomes meaningless to talk about from our perspective we live in, or from the etymology itself. Just as rocks are made of this underlying consciousness, so too are plants, animals, and all matter. Plants are living biological matter, like animals, but they don't have what is considered consciousness as the word was created in etymology. We should not engage in the false equivocation of the all-consciousness when talking about the expressive consciousness of many species of animal kind, of mobility in action and behavior, of expressing consciousness, of memory in storing specific knowledge, of recall of memory in understanding word symbols, etc. Animals are animals, plants are plants. Humans are a step above the rest of the animals in consciousness, capabilities, and potential, and our symbolic understanding far exceeds the rest, while others excel in sight, hearing, taste, sensation, etc. Our excellence is in consciousness itself, which we can develop and harness for good or evil, or let go to waste in unmanifested potential and value. Here is a breakdown of 3 basic levels of consciousness that various biological life forms can be said to express. Each successive level has the preceding level as part of it, like a species general loop if you are familiar with metaphysics, which will be presented partially later. This reference to metaphysics and presented partially later is the newest presentation I did after these articles but before these audios, which is Metaphysics, Language, and Reality, the Fundamentals of the Trivium. So if you go to that, you'll understand more the species general loop, or you can go read Aristotle or go read a summary on Wikipedia or something. It's basically a parent-child relationship, if you understand that from programming. So the first level of consciousness manifestations that can be expressed. Direct sense experience, one stimulus and one automatic response. No memory. All life has this aspect. There is not conscious knowledge stored and recalled, but more of a response or alteration of basic survival programming to maximize longevity and existence of being. Genetic information is knowledge of a kind, but not the conscious knowledge that progresses in the evolution towards real consciousness, as the word really means. This level 1 is a base pre-consciousness that all biological life has. So in terms of this first level, I'm not even calling it consciousness, because in consciousness, in terms of knowledge, which is what real consciousness is, this isn't real consciousness, this is just storing data at a biological level in order to maximize your existence and longevity. As far as I know, there's no way to show that a plant has a mind. As far as I know, you can't show that. Could you demonstrate that the things a plant does is not wholly in its biological programming, and that alterations can't be done to that programming? Versus when you look at animals, are you going to say that everything that humans can store is all stored in our DNA? In genetics somewhere? In biological programming? For animals too? No, I don't believe that. It doesn't make any sense to me. For animals and plants, it's 2 different components of consciousness. That's the big difference I'm trying to make here. Is number 1, all All life has a stimulus to response without any processing. We all have basic survival programming. Everything has this. But the storing of knowledge, that takes higher life forms. As far as I'm concerned, plants don't have that. They can alter their programming according to the survival needs, and instead of doing something for a certain environmental condition, they change and do something else, because that's part of the programming, that if a certain stimulus of an environment is X, then you produce Y. If the stimulus is A, then you produce B. And if the stimulus never goes away, then you can change your programming in order to do something as a default rather than something else as a default. Like, if you understand how programming works, if you've taken computer programming, I have a degree in computer science, so I can see how plants can be simply programming with more of a hive mind, collective consciousness, which other lower animals have in a certain capacity, like ants and bees. You know, the hive mind. Well, my current conception of looking how plants could work as a form of consciousness would be not in an individuated capacity, but as a collective, in addition to their own basic survival biological programming. Anyways, I still have to look into all this, but these are my initial intuited concepts, which I have not verified enough yet. So normally I don't talk about these subjects because I haven't verified them, and I don't like to put out things that I haven't verified, but I'm just putting it out there because this is where I'm going in my research. So the level 2 is perception and memory, and I have a link to an article where I went into the etymology to explain memory and perception, and that would be the Tracing Reality, the Visionary Quest to Wisdom article, which is linked at the bottom of the articles. These 5 parts. Perception, memory, awareness of things, entities, existence in physical universe, not the abstract existence. Percept is automatic. Open your eyes, hear a sound, feel wind on your skin. Memory, through perception, stores sense experiences, and this allows for learning from the past, from trial and error, and integrating various experiences. Most animals have this capacity, if not all, and we can see them demonstrated in reality with our own senses. We don't need technology to sense things beyond our given tools for existence to see the reality of basic animal consciousness and knowledge they possess. So this relates to the other article at the end of these 5 articles, having to do with senses and not requiring technology to understand reality most accurately. When you use technology, you're getting too much data that you haven't even processed the capacity to think and develop your logical processing capabilities with the normal knowledge of your God-given senses, of your innate born senses, the 5 senses. You haven't even been able to process that properly. You haven't even been able to comprehend reality properly with those senses and the tools you have at your disposal. And you're going to go into technology, add more data when you can't even understand the data you've previously been collecting in the basic form. Now you're going to complexify everything. Oh, well, plants got 25 senses and 20 senses and whatever it is, and now, oh my God, now they're becoming animals. Yeah. People are twisting language, manipulating language in order to manipulate your minds and alter your conception of reality. And now plants are going to become animals because people don't care about reality and truth. They don't know how to use their senses to look at reality and discern what is there. Everyone's dependent on technology, and they have no independence within themselves to discern reality. Everything is a dependence on an authority, on an expert. It's all appeals. Appeal to an authority, appeal to an expert, appeal to technology. No one looks into things themselves. No one thinks. No one does their homework. It is a really sad, pathetic state of affairs to look at this planet, and especially the truther community. It's really, really sad. You call yourself a truther, and you don't even know how to think properly for yourself. Please go develop the capacity to think for yourself and learn how to do it properly. Learn logic. I cannot emphasize the importance, the supreme importance of logic in reality. For me, there's truth and morality, and right under truth and morality as the transcendental beings, truth and morality as transcendental beings, I have the law of logic as the supreme thing in the universe. Because non-contradiction and identity, where A is not A, A is A, it's not A. Things are themselves, they're not other things. Logic underlies everything in the universe. It's supremely important, and people underutilize this capacity of our consciousness. It needs to be really developed a lot more. So that's what my work hopes to bring about, this importance, to inculcate this importance in your mind as a mind virus. The importance of thought is really, really important, and with thought comes logic. People need to learn how to think more. There's my little rant there. So the third level is conceptual abstraction. Generalize one or more similar instances from particular retained memories, which is to identify universals. Green can be abstracted from frogs, leaves, grass, etc. The concept is communicated as a symbolic reference to reality. Abstractions can be compounded to build higher order, deeper conceptual understanding of reality. Humans are the animal known to possess this capacity to the greatest degree. I'm not saying they're the only ones who are able to abstract, say, the color green. We just have it to the greatest degree. I would say some animals can process commonalities and differences in reality and recognize a similar color, shape, sound, or smell. Animals differ in degree of consciousness, expressive capability in thought, emotion, and action. Humans can express these three modalities to the greatest degree. You could look at the biological consciousness being the same, and which would be level 1, and the limitations are imposed by the I'm going to reread that. You could look at all the biological consciousness being the same, and the limitations are imposed by the biological life form unit that hosts the consciousness. Okay, so I'm saying the three levels are expressed dependent upon the limitations of the biological life form which can express that level of consciousness. So if you do so, then plants are still not animals, if you take this into considerations. Humans are animals, but with even more freedom of will and capacity to express consciousness, while other animals are in varying degrees of restriction in consciousness compared to us. But animals are not plants. If you were stuck in a plant, then you don't have eyes or ears. You don't interact with reality like animals do. You are food for the existence of animals to be possible. This is a primary purpose of plants in this alleged progression and evolution of consciousness, for without plants, no animal life would possibly exist. And I have a link to a previous article, it's just called Plant Purpose. That's the purpose of plants, is to sustain animal life, for without plants, previous to animal life, there would be no animal life. It's a requisite. Hence, it's part of their definition and meaning in existence. After plants come various degrees of animals, and it seems humans have the greatest potential to manifest in reality through the expressions of their consciousness. So if you choose to look at the, quote, all consciousness, minerals are at the bottom, then plants, then animals. You cannot fallaciously equivocate plants with animals, nor either of those with minerals. If we could simply eat something else other than plants and spare their limited consciousness and let them continue existing, then we could do that and it would be more moral to do so. As reality is demonstrated to all, though, plants are required to sustain animal life as we currently know it. So currently as things are, that's the way it is. So you're going to cry and get upset that the plant biological life is required to sustain animal biological life? Well, then you're going to cry about existence and the way things are. That's just the way things are. That's why I don't consider it an immorality to eat plants, because they're not animals. Because we do need plants to survive currently. So I don't consider it an immorality at all. Maybe human animals can evolve beyond this to breatharianism or some such thing. We have this greater capacity for thought in consciousness, and we have as reality is demonstrated to all, though, plants are required to sustain animal life as we currently know it. Maybe human animals can evolve beyond this to breatharianism or some such thing. We have this greater capacity for thought in consciousness, and we have greater power that comes with this capacity. Great power for evil or good. With great power comes great responsibility. Morality is a primary purpose in evolving consciousness. We are responsible to truth and morality as higher order consciousness beings. Section 2.3, Control, Conformity, and Irresponsibility. We need to do this work of developing our thought capacity. The current society creates strong codependence with over-specialization in many aspects of life, from our jobs to specific knowledge and media exposure that promotes less thinking and less depth of thought. The specialization on certain aspects of human constructs for living in falsity or distractions and pleasure focuses attention away from other more meaningful aspects of ourselves and the world. There are not enough generalists to look at the bigger picture, as people are limited in their scope and input of knowledge. The selective media input and superficial concern with physical presentation, with cosmetics, keeps people infatuated with the many appearances and idolatry in the media, keeping them titillated or numbed and unconcerned with developing their higher order consciousness capacities in thought. People get stuck in the appearance of particulars over the substance of meaning and definition found in the essential substance underlying it all, which would allow them to see the deceptive illusions for what they are, and also the clarity to get back to the right path and way. The over-specialization and restriction of ways of living can be seen in the caste system. To divide people into specific aspects of life and require each other to complete the overall system's functionality that serves the overlords. This includes basic survival mechanisms being removed from the individual. This is the codependence and enslavement through coerced economic survivability. Movies like Divergent display this explicitly in how the compartmentalization of aspects of living divided people within themselves and prevented them from actualizing themselves. The one who had all five aspects was deemed a threat to the existing social order, as they were non-conformist. They had more aspects of living authentic. Over-specialization breeds weakness and devolution in general through the removal of adaptability of the individual. Related to specialization is the resulting compartmentalization that comes from focusing on only certain things. This leads to a lack of responsibility as a whole, as then we only need to be focusing on our jobs and what we want, desire, or wish for in life. Only do what you think and feel you need to do. Only do what your specific job requires. Let other people do their jobs. Don't defend yourself. There is a job for that. Police take care of that for you. Don't prepare food for yourself. There is a job for other people to do that for you. Don't grow your own food. There are jobs for people to do that for you. There is a problem, but the people in the jobs are busy and can't deal with the problem. I guess we do nothing and wait. Wait for someone else to take up the responsibility according to their job. When there is a problem, we can just hold someone else accountable. We don't have to deal with it. It's not our job. It's not our compartment. That's for the politicians or policemen, etc. This laziness from the workplace gets into our regular life. Then we get to our enslavement. If you're not a part of the system, you don't have anything, which is what homeless people have. If you are not part of the compartmentalization, then you do not have the opportunity to survive and must live on the street. It's someone else's job to fix the system and all the problems, not mine to go learn about reality. That's the way everyone sees it. It's not my job to fix things. It's someone else's job. I got my own job. And certainly not my job and my responsibility to go learn about reality. Certainly not that. The ones we are waiting for are ourselves. The somebody to fix things is you, me, and all of us. Every person needs to learn and seek truth to eventually find the depth of the moral baseline to live from in order to create true freedom and peace. Removal of wrongdoings, removal of errors, removal of evil is more important than creating a bunch of things that will continue to distract us from ourselves, our behavior, and how we create evil. Section 2.4, Importance of Thought. This is the last section. Thinking identifies aspects of reality and corresponds them with symbols to logically connect and communicate that knowledge. Thinking right, correctly, and properly is to bring perceptions into alignment with reality. Recognizing wrongness is a result of comparison in reality and seeing a contradiction between things. Something doesn't fit. Observe reality, process the data to form concepts, then verify the concepts for contradiction and reach greater understanding. The conclusion about reality is tested through reference to reality and its facts therein, and can be confirmed by others once this understanding is expressed to them. The Trivium method is likened to alchemy and natural moral law expressions of behavior, as previously mentioned in Part 1. These models can help us learn about ourselves and reality in order to evolve consciousness. Through proper thought in contemplation, reflection, concentration, and true meditation of the mental imagery that exists within us, we can accurately model the actions and relationships before they happen and predict what the result of specific behavior will be. And this is related to morality of the future rather than morality of the past, which already happened. Morality of the future, to predict it, is a study called Synderesis, and you can look into that. There's a link here, and it's part of my article on Tracing Reality, the Visionary Quest to Wisdom. I found out this term. Continuing, we don't have to keep repeating the same actions, the same mistakes. This process is proactive and requires the focus of the free will to choose to engage in it. We have to choose our free will to stop repeating the same actions and learn from our mistakes. And if you don't engage in logical processing, you're just a stimulus response, lower level consciousness, lower level 1 consciousness being, which is why everyone is essentially dead in our society, because that's how they operate. They don't learn, they don't think, they don't use logic, they don't process. It's 50% stimulus response and the basic processing of things in their daily routines and the trivialities of their life. Well, that's where they use their logic, but they don't use it in any actual important higher order capacity, unfortunately. So that's why they're unawakened, uninitiated, unbegun, in the tomb, in the graveyard, dead, because they're not on the journey yet. They don't care for truth and morality and other beings enough in order to progress and want to learn how wrong and fooled they are. Now, this process is proactive and requires the focus of the free will to choose to engage in it. It is not automatic impressions, as is the initial perceptual apprehension of reality. This proactive conscious awareness of reality through the imagery in our minds will lead to greater evolution in consciousness. So to finish off the last paragraph, I have an infographic from a previous presentation on the appearances, substance versus appearances. This is the power differential from occulted knowledge, and it has a triangle or a pyramid. At the bottom, you have ignorance of most people, which are focused on appearances, which you have unknown and confused people. At the top is where you have understanding of the depth of substance, which empowers you through that knowledge of what is known. And this knowledge is the hidden occulted knowledge, There's a minor and major aspect. These are the lower knowledge of ourselves, the function and behavior of individual consciousness, and the higher self-knowledge of the natural laws governing the consequences of behavior. So you can check out that infographic more or go to the original article on substance and appearances. Continuing with the article, thinking is important. It provides for the acquisition of knowledge. Knowledge that is hidden, occulted knowledge, often creates a power differential between those who have the knowledge and those who don't. With quality thinking and judgments on the information we receive, we can retain the quality knowledge and use them to guide our decisions for living, our actions and behaviors. The quality of knowledge derived from understanding reality and ourselves will lead to a greater quality of life. Truth leads to freedom. People can be prevented from thinking properly and making sound judgments by restricting information and occulting it. This is a method to dumb people down as it undermines their ability to make knowledgeable decisions in life. Their capacity to develop intellectual self-defense is manipulated and stifled by garbage information. People are easily fooled by false information because they do not know how to validate it correctly. To develop our capacity for thought and discernment of reality is to help increase the degree of certainty we have to distinguish reality from unreality or fiction. This topic of occulting reality and encrypting reality will be in part 3. This is why we must think better, because there are master manipulators of thought who have spent much time developing their capacity of thought. So that's the end of the article, and the next article is part 3. So thank you for listening to part 2, and you can look forward to part 3 next. Have a nice day. Peace.